The words hit like a quiet slap in the middle of the hotel lobby. The evening lights shimmered against polished marble floors. Business travelers moved in tired silence, and the soft hum of the air conditioner filled the space. But for Michael Carter, time seemed to pause the moment his boss leaned toward the receptionist and said something that made his chest tighten. "Why waste money on 2 rooms?" she said calmly. At first, Michael thought he had misheard, but then he saw the receptionist hesitate, glancing between them. Michael wasn't just a regular employee on a business trip. He was a single father who had spent the last 4 years rebuilding his life piece by piece after losing everything. And now, in one quiet moment, his dignity felt like it was being tested. But what he said next would shock his boss in a way she never expected. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and compassion still matter in this world, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Michael Carter had never planned to become a single father. 4 years earlier, his wife Rachel had passed away suddenly after a brief illness, leaving him alone with their 3-year-old son, Ethan. The grief nearly crushed him. Bills piled up, sleep disappeared, and every day felt like walking through fog. Friends drifted away because they didn't know what to say. Family lived in another state, and suddenly Michael was responsible for everything. Daycare, cooking, laundry, school forms, bedtime stories, and the quiet tears he tried to hide from his little boy. He had worked as a warehouse supervisor back then, barely making enough to keep the lights on. But Michael had one powerful motivation: Ethan. Every morning when Ethan wrapped his tiny arms around his neck and said, "Love you, Daddy," Michael felt the strength to keep going. He took night classes online after Ethan fell asleep. He studied management, accounting, and logistics while drinking cheap coffee at the kitchen table. 3 years later, those sleepless nights paid off. Michael landed a job at Harper Logistics, a rapidly growing shipping company based in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it offered stability, benefits, and the chance to move up. His new boss was Victoria Lawson. Victoria was known throughout the company as brilliant, efficient, and intimidating. She was in her early 40s, sharp-minded, always perfectly dressed, and rarely smiled. Employees whispered that she cared more about numbers than people. Michael respected her professionalism, but he always felt nervous around her, which made this work trip even more stressful. The company had sent them to Denver to finalize a partnership with a regional distribution firm. It was a 2-day negotiation that could bring millions of dollars in contracts. Michael had spent weeks preparing reports, projections, and strategy documents. But there was one complication. Ethan's daycare had closed unexpectedly due to a plumbing emergency. Michael had tried every option: neighbors, friends, babysitters, but no one was available. After hours of panic, he finally asked Victoria if he could bring Ethan along for the trip. He expected her to refuse. Instead, she surprised him by saying yes. She didn't sound thrilled, but she allowed it. And now, standing in the hotel lobby, Michael wondered if that decision had annoyed her more than she admitted. The receptionist looked uncertain. "Ma'am, the reservation includes 2 rooms." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "It's just unnecessary company spending," she said. "They're only staying 1 night." Michael felt his stomach twist. He glanced down at Ethan, who was half asleep on his shoulder, clutching a small dinosaur toy. Victoria turned to him, speaking in the same calm, corporate tone she used during meetings. "You and the kid can take my suite's living room sofa. It's large enough." The words were practical, but something about them stung. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the years Michael had spent fighting to give his son stability. For a moment, he considered staying silent. He needed this job. He needed the health insurance. He needed the salary that finally allowed him to buy Ethan new shoes instead of second-hand ones. But then he remembered something Rachel once told him during their hardest days. "Your worth isn't measured by what you can afford. It's measured by what you refuse to accept." Michael slowly shifted Ethan on his shoulder and looked directly at Victoria. His voice was calm, but what he said next froze the air around them. "If the company can't afford 2 rooms," he said quietly, "I'll pay for mine myself. But my son deserves a bed, and I deserve to keep my dignity." The receptionist stopped typing. Victoria stared at him. It wasn't anger she felt. It was something else. Surprise. No employee had ever spoken to her like that. Not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly. For the first time that evening, she really looked at Michael Carter. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the worn edges of his suitcase, the little boy asleep against his shoulder, and suddenly, a memory from her own childhood surfaced. Her father had worked 2 jobs after her mother left. She remembered the exhaustion on his face, the sacrifices he made, the quiet pride he carried. For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. Then she turned back to the receptionist. 2 rooms, she said simply, and add room service breakfast for both. Michael blinked, surprised. But the real surprise came the next day. During the negotiation meeting, something unexpected happened. The partner company pushed back on pricing, threatening to walk away from the deal. The room grew tense. Executives argued numbers. Spreadsheets filled the screen. But Michael saw something they didn't. A small logistical inefficiency buried in the supply chain proposal. He calmly explained how adjusting distribution routes could reduce costs by nearly 15%. The room fell silent. The partner company executives exchanged glances. Within minutes, the entire deal shifted in their favor. Victoria watched him carefully the entire time. After the meeting ended, she approached him in the hallway. For once, her voice sounded different, softer. "You saved that deal today," she said. Michael shrugged modestly. "I just did my job." Victoria shook her head slightly. "No," she said quietly. "You did more than that." She paused, then added something that shocked him. "I misjudged you last night." Michael didn't know how to respond. Victoria glanced toward the lobby where Ethan sat coloring at a small table. "You're raising him alone?" Michael nodded. "For 4 years." Victoria watched the boy for a moment. Then she said something no one in the company had ever heard from her before. "That's harder than running any business." Over the next few months, things began to change. Victoria started involving Michael in bigger decisions. His ideas improved operations. His leadership helped motivate the team. And within a year, Michael Carter was promoted to Regional Operations Manager. But the biggest moment came during the company's annual leadership conference. Standing in front of hundreds of employees, Victoria told the story of the Denver trip. She spoke about pride, respect, and the moment an employee reminded her what leadership truly meant. Then she called Michael onto the stage. The audience applauded as he walked forward, slightly embarrassed but smiling. Victoria shook his hand, and for the first time anyone could remember, she smiled. Before we reach the end of this story, tell us something in the comments. If you were in Michael's place that night in the hotel lobby, would you have stayed silent or spoken up? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Michael returned home that night to Ethan, who ran into his arms shouting, "Daddy!" And in that simple moment, Michael knew something important. Success wasn't just about promotions, money, or recognition. It was about standing up for your values, even when it felt risky. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can say is simply the truth. And sometimes that truth can change everything. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the power of dignity and kindness, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you more meaningful stories like this. Because somewhere out there, someone might be waiting for a reminder that courage and compassion still matter.